This vehicle is a piece of junk. Oh no. And I ain't kidding you. Look at this. Bumper's all busted off. Emblems missing. Scything, that's missing. And I mean, besides being dirty, I mean, speaking of dirt, there is an inch of dust on everything in here. Trash all over the place. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It smells like you put your face in somebody's ball cap that they've been wearing for the past 2 years and they ain't never washed it. Inside a hay barn. Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. It's really bad. So this Mazda CX-3 has a check engine light, and it has a lack of oil pressure, causing code P0524 to set. And we need to diagnose this thing, find out what's going on, and let's start doing that right now. This is like, it's a lack of respect. I don't know, a lack of respect for yourself, for a lack of respect for anybody that may need to drive this vehicle, lack of respect for the vehicle, for sure. Lack of respect for the technician that needs to get in and drive the vehicle and work on it. I mean, it's like eating a bag of cheese puffs on the way to a dentist appointment. So we got a check engine light coming on. We got the oil pressure light coming on while driving down the road. The vehicle loses power. It goes into limp mode. You can't even get up the hill. I mean, it has absolutely no power. The oil light comes on, it stays on, low oil pressure. I'm not hearing any tapping, knocking, rattling, anything like that in the engine, but it is definitely going into limp mode. And we're gonna have to diagnose this thing. And so in this diagnostic, we got flow charts and wiring schematics and more flow charts and more wiring schematics and more flow charts, and you know, ain't no way to get around this. This thing's got to be diagnosed. There's no easy step, so we just got to get into it. So this P0524 is basically saying that the engine oil pressure is too low. That's all Mazda's telling you. That's what it is. Oil pressure is too low. I didn't know that. That's cool. So it's got two flow charts here. One is without coolant control valve, and the other one is with coolant control valve. So depending on which vehicle you have, depends on which flow chart you do, and yeah, we don't need that. So we got this one. This one has the coolant control valve. It's got the coolant control valve sitting right in there. And if you don't know about the coolant control valve, then there's another video I did on a CX-5 coolant control valve replacement, and you can check that up. I will go ahead and I'll put a link right up here so you can check that video out on replacement of the coolant control valve. That was cool. So This one we're going to be checking oil pressure, seeing if our oil pressure is dropping or what. And you think that it would be as simple as just check your oil pressure. You got a low oil pressure, then you got a bad oil pump, you know, or maybe oil passages stopped up. Well, this has a oil pressure sensor, of course, oil pressure sensor, oil pressure temperature sensor. They're all in one. And I know that oil pressure sensor is good because we just replaced it because the oil pressure sensor was just spewing out oil out of the back of the connector. So rather than diagnosing anything right away, we need to get that oil pressure sensor replaced. So that's what we did. We put a brand new one in, and of course it still has the code coming up. But it has a engine oil solenoid valve which adjusts the oil pressure. See, so we need to diagnose that. And of course it's got wires and stuff coming from the solenoid valve to the PCM, powertrain control module, over here. So we're going to have to diagnose the wiring harness, ohm out the harness, check for short to ground possibly in each of those circuits, and probably pull out the solenoid valve and test that, make sure that's working right. And we will follow along with this flow chart and looking at our wire schematics, and let's get to it. Okay, let's look at what we're dealing with here. This is for the one without the coolant control valve. We do have the coolant control valve, but just so you can see the difference in this schematic, this one without the coolant control valve, it's easy. Got oil pressure switch going to the PCM. That's it. Oil pressure or not. Okay. This is the one that we're dealing with. We have an oil pressure sensor that also has engine oil temperature sensor inside it. It's all in one. And we got this engine solenoid valve that adjusts the pressure of the oil pressure. Right, so, and this is just a schematic in the flow chart to show you what's going on. Here's the real schematic right here with the oil temperature sensor, oil pressure sensor, and which goes through a bunch of bill-em-a-bob all the way over to the PCM right here. And then this is the schematic that shows the engine oil solenoid valve, which adjusts the pressure. That goes to the PCM also. So following this flow chart, we can skim through some stuff. Oh, so one of the things I wanted to show you with this other one is that one of the first things that it tells you to do is, well, of course it's going to tell you to make sure that you got oil pressure or oil in the vehicle, you know, and there's no engine oil leaking. Is there engine oil leaking? No, there's no oil leaking. Let's go to the next step. Inspect the oil level. Oil level good? Yeah. If it wasn't good, you know, I wouldn't be here. So it's good. So we just go to the next step. Engine oil temperature sensor, engine oil pressure sensor, connector. Is the condition of the connector good? Yeah, we replaced that sensor. I know that it's good. I've already looked at it. So yeah, it's good. Let's go to the next step. Disconnect the engine oil solenoid valve connector. Is that in good condition? Yes, it's in good condition. I've already checked all that stuff. So, and is there any kind of corrosion? Is there a malfunction? No, there's no malfunction. Okay, so let's go to the next step. Disconnect the PCM connector. At the PCM, inspect the connector, you know, such as for damaged pins, anything like that. Is there any kind of malfunction? No, there's not. Let's go to the next step. Okay, let's stop there. Through all of that in our correct flow chart, it has never asked us to check oil pressure. It's like, check your oil pressure. Do you have good oil pressure? So this one right here goes through basically those same steps, but right here it says inspect engine oil pressure. And of course, this is the one that doesn't have the coolant control valve, so we ain't even looking at that one. Get that out of here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check the oil pressure. I want to put a gauge on it. I want to see what the oil pressure is like. So does it really have oil pressure or not? you know, what's going on. Because the oil pressure light's coming on, I don't hear any kind of grinding or anything like that. We're gonna get the oil pressure gauge on it, and we're gonna check and see what the pressure is like. How much pressure is it supposed to have? How much pressure does it really have? Let's check that out first before we go in through any more of this stuff, because the next step right here is disconnect the PCM, disconnect the oil pressure sensor, disconnect the solenoid, and we're going to check for continuity to ground in these A, D, and B. A and D of the harness for the oil temperature sensor, oil pressure sensor, and circuit B in the oil solenoid valve terminal to ground. We're going to check for continuity with everything disconnect. We got to disconnect all this stuff first. Let's check the oil pressure before we disconnect all that stuff. Because one thing Mazda likes to do is they like for you to take everything apart and check stuff, then put everything back together so you can check one thing that you could have checked from the beginning. So let's just check that first. Okay, you can see I have my mechanical oil pressure gauge hooked up here, and the first increment that you can read is 10 psi, and the second is 20 psi. Right in between there, you could figure that's about 15 psi. The spec on this is 16 psi at 1500 RPM, and so I went in and started it up. I got out, looked at it, made sure it had oil pressure and it wasn't spewing oil all over the floor, and then I got back in and just run it through its courses. What I didn't realize is that it is dropping oil pressure. It doesn't sound like it's rattling or banging or knocking or anything like that, but you can see as the RPMs come up, it definitely is draining or losing oil pressure. And had I known it was losing oil pressure so much, I wouldn't have continued to run it. But we definitely have a problem, either oil pump, or it could be that oil pressure regulating solenoid valve there, and we need to get into that diagnostic and do that. Okay, so now we're going to check this engine oil temperature sensor, engine oil pressure sensor, terminal A to ground. We're checking with the PCM disconnected, the engine oil solenoid disconnected, the oil pressure sensor disconnected. You have to make sure everything's disconnected whenever you're checking continuity, otherwise you get a false reading. So with those disconnected, we're going to go from this pin right here, this is A, and we're going to go not from the sensor itself, but then the sensor's not in there anymore right now, but from the harness side to ground. We're going to check and see if this harness is shorted to ground. Then after checking that, we're going to go to sensor terminal D. So this is D right here, and we're going to check that connector, see if we got any continuity to ground. After that, we're going to go to the engine oil solenoid valve B. So that's a different one. It's right here. This is B. So this is the connector to the PCM. And of course, these are all disconnected, and we're going to check that circuit right there to see if it's shorted to ground. And we'll see what happens. Okay, I got to take the battery out because the PCM is behind the battery. I got to get that connection out, disconnect everything. So start with pulling the PCM out, and now I'm gonna check the baseline with my meter. So I got my meter hooked to ground, and I'm gonna check the other end to ground, and it's actually showing a good reading. It's below 1 ohm, so that way I know that my meter is hooked up to ground properly. And the first thing I'm going to do is check the first connector on the oil pressure switch, and I'm going to check that to ground. see if I got any continuity. It's pretty tough. I can't get my head up underneath this. There's not very much room at all to get up in there. So it's hard to even get the camera in there. Trying to show which connector I'm hooked up to, which pin, and I'm back probing these pins. You should always back probe on these connectors, guys, because you don't want to cause any issues by sticking something into the front of those connectors. And so now I'm going to the next wire on that connector, and I'm checking for continuity to ground on that wire, and I'll tell you right now that I'm not getting anything. I'm getting no continuity at all. And then now the last one is on that oil solenoid connector, that one pin right there, and checking that to ground for continuity. And this is what I'm getting. OL stands for out of limits. It's infinity. It means no continuity, almost like an open circuit. Okay, so now that we know that we have no continuity to ground, that's what this is checking to see if we have a short to ground. And we know that there is no continuity to ground. Is there continuity? No. So go to the next step, inspect the engine oil pressure sensor. We know the engine oil pressure sensor is good because it's a brand new one that we just put on. And so we're gonna skip that one. Is there a malfunction? There's no malfunction. We got a brand new engine oil pressure. So no, there's no malfunction. Go to the next step, inspect engine oil solenoid valve. That's this check right here, where we're going to be supplying power and ground to the solenoid connector, and we're gonna listen for it. A click noise. A click sound is heard when the engine oil solenoid valve operates normally. So we're gonna look at it and we're gonna see if it moves and make sure that it clicks, and that's what we're gonna do right now. So like I said, there's no room to get in here. It's very, very tight. I can barely get the camera in here, but you can see that solenoid right above it. That's a water pump, and you cannot pull that solenoid out to test it without pulling the entire housing out. And you can see my hose right there for the oil pressure mechanical gauge, and I'm trying to get these bolts out. I can actually barely see them. Okay, so now I need to get this solenoid off of this housing so I can test it and we can look at it. And looking at the solenoid, it's got two screens up there on that solenoid that I don't see any metal or anything on there, and I'm looking inside the housing, and it's got some oil in there, of course, but I don't see any metal on that. So now I got my power probe hooked to the battery so I can go ahead and test it. And I'll supply power and ground to the solenoid and see if it clicks. Okay, so we checked the engine oil solenoid valve, and was it clicking? Yeah, it was clicking. Is there any malfunction? No, there's no malfunction. What is it saying? Replace the oil pump, then go to the next step. So now it's saying replace the oil pump. What's amazing to me is nowhere in this flow chart did it ever say check your oil pressure, see what your oil pressure is. But of course, I'm guessing that according to them, if it has this code, then it's got low oil pressure. So they didn't say check oil passages, nothing like that. Check the oil pump screen. It's just like just replace the oil pump. So now we are going to drop the oil pan, replace the oil pump, the pickup screen, everything that deals with the oil pump we're going to be replacing. Well, truth going on being told, it's been about a week since we last looked at this vehicle, and we got our parts in. So let's check out what parts we got in. Let's see. We got our oil filter. I'm gonna need that. This looks like the pickup screen. Yeah, that's the pickup screen. For the new pump. Sure is, and it has a seal on it right there too. Got some rid of Mazda silicone. It's really silly. This is, looks like the sprocket. The sprocket for the pump. Yeah, the pump is time and chain driven. So, and this right here should be the pump itself. This open. And there she is. It's a time and chain driven oil pump, and the pickup screen is going to go on there like that. So now what we need to do is get this thing up in the air, take the oil pan off, drain the oil first, of course. Take the oil pan off and get that pump replaced. The only thing that's going to stop us is if it's got metal. You know, hopefully it doesn't have metal in the pan. Shiny oil, that's one thing, but actual metal sitting in the pan, that's not good. Now, whenever I pulled that solenoid out of there, I was looking inside that housing to see if there was any kind of metal, and I didn't see any metal on the inside, you know, with the oil. I didn't see any metal around the screens. There's actually screens around that solenoid, and there was no metal on that. So hopefully we're good there, and we're just going to replace the pump and be done with it. But let's get started on that right now. Okay, so I got the pan out, and you can see there's not really much in here, and as far as sludge and stuff, there's a little tiny bit of flake of metal, and I don't know if you can see that, but not much, not bad. It's a little bit of sludge right here, and this vehicle, it's got about 56,000 miles on it. It's a 2019. Now, it ain't got much of a history, and you look into the history of this vehicle, it doesn't have a lot of oil changes, like maybe 5 in the Carfax service, and I think the last one that registered in Carfax service was 15 or 17,000 miles. So somebody's been doing oil changes on this thing. But anyway, I'm just gonna get this cleaned up, and I'll get that old pump off of there and swap it out, and get this all put back together and see what happens. Okay, so now that I got the oil pump out, this is the sprocket. We're replacing this. I'm gonna use this time right now, since this is out of the way, to clean up all this junk here, this RTV, and get all that out. Okay, so here's the new sprocket, and I'm just gonna get this in here ready to put the new pump in. Now, I know this chain, I don't know if you can see it, it's got marks on there, but this chain is actually, it's not timed. It's not like a balance shaft or anything like that. You just stick it in there, and I'll get the new pump up in here and we'll get that connected. Okay, so I got this old pan all cleaned up, and I'm gonna put some Mazda rid of silicone. It's really silly. I'm gonna put this on here right now and get this pan up there. Okay, we got everything put back together. Got oil in the thing, got codes cleared. I got it running. It seemed like it's running fine. I do not have any check engine light. There is no oil light coming on or anything. It sounds fine. So let's take her on the road, see how she performs. Last time I went on a test drive, I barely even made it back up the hill. It was in limp mode. So let's see how it goes now. Okay guys, there you go. One more chicken light down. So the oil pressure light is not coming on anymore. Check engine light is not coming on. It's got fairly decent power. It's not going into limp mode anymore. And so that's gonna be it for this video. I still need to put the engine undercover on it, and I'm probably gonna run it a couple more times just to make sure that everything's all right. But that'll pretty much do it for World Car Auto Group and Shop Foreman Garage. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.